Alabama has a new law that could lead to a substantial reduction in the cost of saving life. It's called the Good Samaritan Law. It means a physician or paramedic or ambulance attendant or policeman or fireman or even a passerby can try his best to save a life and not be sued later. It means anyone in Alabama can give aid to a victim and not have to pay for consequences. It means you can get help, and it means no one will face a civil suit for helping you. While it may not make costs go down, it very well could keep them from going up. It means everyone won't have to carry malpractice insurance just for emergencies. And that new law is doing more than that. It's making legal what many people in this state have wanted for a long time: quick, efficient, and proper emergency medical care conveniently located. There are many examples, but some have only recently been in the public view. Tonight we explore some of those examples.
The Cost of Saving Life is brought to you in part by Exchange National Bank of Montgomery. Still your bank.
When a guy like Tony comes into McDonald's, we can't let him down.
So we make his hamburger with 100% beef. And the beef is lean, leaner than the ground beef most people buy.
What really matters to Tony, and to us, is his first bite. How's your hamburger?
Tastes good.
At McDonald's, we do it all for you.
Hi, Wayne Collett for Arrow Rents. Your patient home care needs can be found at Arrow Rents, where you can save money by renting the items you need. Arrow Rents has hospital beds, wheelchairs, patient lifts, traction equipment, a full assortment of crutches, walkers, and stroke canes, and a variety of other items to keep your patient as comfortable as possible. At Arrow Rents, we're in business to save you money by renting the equipment.
Montgomery has what is known locally as a fire medic program. The city and county governments have entered into a contract with the hospitals and doctors to provide a program of emergency medical service, using those fire medics for victim aid at the scene. The medics went through a great deal of training, some even funded by the medics themselves. But once they were on the streets, using what equipment the city could provide at the time, they were taken off.
Well, I think the reason that they were put back is basically because there was a need. And as Mayor Robertson said during the time that the paramedics was down, that it was felt by members of the fire department, and in my opinion, along with Chief Odoms, that we were misleading the public as to what they could expect from the paramedics. And it was sort of like having an automobile with two wheels on it. So what we had to do is either get it operational or discontinued. It was just that simple.
But the governor's coordinator for highway and traffic safety found money for the program. The next day, the fire medics were back in action. However, the mayor of Montgomery pointed out then, and still says, the men are not yet full-fledged paramedics. They will not be paramedics until they can communicate with a doctor at a hospital. Complete communication with telemetry and voice tie-in from the scene. Some of the paramedics refer to the present situation as having their hands tied. They say they want to do more.
Sure, they want to do more, but it takes time to get the fluids, drugs, and proper communications to the emergency room. But we're making progress.
We will be letting bids very shortly, and of course here again we're dependent on the manufacturers getting this equipment to us, getting it operational, having proper communications with the hospitals, and direct contact with the physicians in the hospital before we can function as true paramedic or fire medic units.
Bids will be taken on the medic equipment this week. Officials say, however, it'll be several months before the program becomes what it was designed to be. But that's not to say the medics are useless now. Dr. W.H. Chandless of the local medical society, who also happens to sit on several statewide emergency medical services committees, notes the medics are functioning very well already. He says they are saving lives. And he says once the special communications equipment is in service, it'll be unique in Alabama. In Montgomery, the medics will be able to send, for example, an electrocardiogram by radio to a doctor at a hospital and talk to that doctor on a voice link-up at the same time. The simultaneous communications will be the only such link-up anywhere in the state. Dr. Chandler says all of the good things that have for so long been discussed are now coming to pass. He says now we're underway, but more will be needed in the future as the state-of-the-art gets even more complicated, but more useful. The hospitals, too, are ready for the newest procedures. The doctors, both the private physicians who are called in for their patients and the special emergency room physicians who are on duty around the clock, are ready and waiting to handle the emergencies.
Well, of course, the patient has a prerogative of seeing what physician really they want to see. Usually if a private patient comes into the emergency room, we find out about this, and of course this physician is contacted, and if he feels that he wants to refer the physician, the patient, to the ER doctor, he'll do so. There's times when we feel like the situation is such that he can refer to a specialty directly. But with time, hopefully, we'll be able to let some of these doctors stay at home at night and take care of some of their patients here.
The public gave a great hue and cry when the paramedics were taken off the street and put back on. There's been a lot of concern about the emergency situation in Montgomery. Do you feel that really it's any different the way it is in practice compared to most other cities? Or people being treated the same way they would anywhere else?
Yes. Again, my brief period here in Montgomery has been, I've been totally impressed with the paramedics and their abilities and the training that they've had and the good job that they're doing. And I came from Birmingham and had been involved in this system there since its starting, and I feel that this system is comparable, and these paramedics are well qualified.
But people say since the hospitals rotate their emergency rooms, you never know from one day to the next to which hospital to go if you need help.
Are all the hospitals' emergency rooms open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? Yes, that's right. They can go to any hospital they want to as long as they have a private physician. Now, to see the emergency room physician, they have to come to that hospital that's on for that particular day on the rotation.
So unless they have no physician or can't pay or are just in a state where they can't tell somebody they have a physician, then it makes no difference, really.
Correct.
That explodes the myth about the emergency room rotation in Montgomery. In fact, some say there are advantages to the rotation under the circumstances.
There are very definitely some good points. We have the backup of all three hospitals, and of course you realize that, I'm sure that in talking to the physicians, you know, the emergency physicians, you realize that without the backup of the staff of the hospitals, you know, you'd really have problems. And by having it at three hospitals, we can call on three complete medical staffs and their specialties, board-certified doctors, to back up the emergency physician.
Would it be better if there was one central location, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week?
I'm sure, yes, it would be better. It would be better in some ways. You know, again, most of us had not been involved. When I came to Montgomery, I was not used to a system like this, and it took some getting used to. But as you said a few moments ago, and we were talking about it, it has some good points. It would also be more expensive to operate if the city and county had to support a facility that was their own, which they do not have, you know. And since they do not have one, all of the hospitals can throw their support together, and we can provide that coverage.
When the hospitals throw their support together to provide coverage, can an emergency room be a money maker for a hospital? You're not here totally as a charity. You have to pay the bills. Could you operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and still exist with an emergency room, or is it just a matter of money going out, nothing coming in?
No, I don't really think it is as much a matter of money as it is space. If you know, I don't think, I would not speak for Jackson and St. Margaret, but for Baptists, we just could not handle. We just do not have the beds, nor the space, nor the resources to handle the tremendous number of indigent patients that would come in through an emergency room. You know, it's fine if you can split it. That'll work fine, and we can take our share, but we still have to maintain enough beds to support our private physicians, and that's one of the big problems in it.
Apparently, the hospital rotation of some emergency room care will continue. The Medical Society doesn't foresee any change for, as Dr. Chandlis puts it, 8 years at least. But all parties agree that presently it works well. The cost of the fire medic program, the costs of operating emergency rooms, the costs of providing help for the injured, the costs of saving life. All of these are on the minds of all parties involved in providing emergency medical services. Some people think it's up to the government to do all of this. But is government supposed to do everything? Montgomery Mayor Jim Robinson thinks not.
Well, I think government for too long has tried to be everything to everybody, and we simply must stop that. In relation to health services, there are certain things that government must provide, and I think it's a partnership arrangement between the hospitals and the doctors and the city government.
Are you satisfied with the current contractual arrangement between the city, the doctors, and the hospitals?
Oh, yes, I'm highly pleased with it because it offers a method of management and a level of management that we did not have before in dealing with the indigent emergency room situation.
Do you feel that fiscal responsibility, what the public is willing to pay for, comes into play in this emergency medical situation?
I think so. I'm not getting any great messages delivered to me from the people that they want to spend $10 or $15 million to build a hospital, if that's what you're talking about. If they're saying it, I'm not picking the message up. I don't believe we can afford that. As you well know, the people of this community voted down a city-county hospital years ago in a bond issue. The private enterprising came in and set up the hospitals, and now we have a contract with private enterprise to get the job done, again, based on the Accident Indigent Emergency Program. I think the people of Montgomery, Alabama are not unlike the people everywhere else. They're struggling at home to make ends meet. We're struggling down here at the city to make ends meet. And we're going to do it like the people at home are going to do it. That means biting the bullet and doing without some things that you'd like to do. Yes, it would be nice to have elaborate programs, but they cost money. Now, what we have here, we should really be thankful for to a large degree. You have private hospitals that are dividing up on an equal basis the care of the indigent patients and people in this community. 1/3 each day of 3 days. If any one hospital were to take all these people on board, it wouldn't be long until they'd have a large inventory or a large number of non-paying patients. These hospitals don't just spring up out of the ground when you water them. You must pay bond issues and meet notes and pay the workers there. So the program that we have is the best that we're going to have until one hospital takes it over or until government moves in and takes over themselves. And it's been my experience in government that government botches things up and the cost just skyrockets when government gets involved in it. So as long as we can keep free enterprise in it, and it's a partnership process, as I mentioned before, government, the doctors, and the hospitals. And with the contract, we're all three doing something for people that cannot help themselves. Now, people that can help themselves, I don't think the taxpayers owe them anything. If they can pay, I think they ought to pay. And we're demanding that of them. We identify people, and in identifying them, we send them to other areas, like HSI, into the rehab center, in places where they can get additional help beyond what we're providing for them. This saves the taxpayers of the city money out of the city treasury, but the taxpayers themselves, let's not kid ourselves, are paying for the other services too. But we're directing them to those available services. And that's all a part of our responsibility.
Is Montgomery in a situation of envying other cities and their help for emergency situations, or other cities watching Montgomery?
Well, according to a news report on your station, other cities have been looking at the program that we have here because the cost is not burgeoning as the costs are in their cities. Now, they're spending millions of dollars, and we're not spending that much. Frankly, if we had it, I think we'd already be spending it. If we had it, we would already be spending it. But we don't have it, so we're not spending it.
So much is being said about the 15% indigent citizens who need emergency care and whether the city is doing its part in Montgomery that we asked just what the city's responsibilities are.
We're responsible for the Accident Indigent Emergency Program. You know, 85% of our people in this community can pay their bill, and they can attend any emergency room that they wish to attend right now. All of the emergency rooms are open. We're talking about that 15% of our community that cannot pay, the unloved and the unloved and the unwanted, that are flat of their back and cannot help themselves. I think that the taxpayers of this community want us to make very sure that some provisions are made for these people. I think they also are asking us to put some limit on what can be expected of the taxpayer, and we've done just that in and through the contract.
Are you saying that as long as you can get a hold of your doctor, you can go to any emergency room you want to?
Yes, sir. Right now.
Maybe this isn't a problem for the city, but suppose you can't reach that doctor.
Well, our police and our ambulance people and all of the emergency-oriented people in our community know where the emergency room is. If you are knocked out and you're beyond helping yourself or to identify yourself or to tell us where to take you, these people know where to go. If you are conscious and you wish to go to a hospital and you have a doctor, then you may go to that hospital.
When you need that assistance, what do? All a Montgomery citizen must do to summon help is dial 911. That's an all-encompassing telephone number for emergency aid. Many cities bigger than Montgomery still don't have it and wish they did. But is 911 being used?
No, they're not. Not as we had planned for or hoped for that they would use. We would certainly encourage, though, all people to dial 911 on any type of emergency they might have. This will speed up the operation. It'll get the message faster to the proper people, and they'll get a response to their needs much, much quicker. They just remember 911.
As simple as dialing 911 can be, and as convenient as fire medics are, neighborhood fire stations are sometimes even more convenient. Can the victim in search of medical aid find it at a fire station?
Yes, sir, they can. All of our firefighters, after they have completed the recruit school training, are advanced first aiders. This is beyond the normal first aid card that people are familiar with. And we have several of our stations around town located in the main thoroughfares and arteries of traffic to where they can go to the fire station, and we have the necessary equipment there to stop profuse bleeding and this sort of thing until we can get someone in there that can handle them correctly.
So even before a rescue truck could get there, then if you see a fire station nearby with one of the Red Crosses on a sign in front, then they can lend assistance.
Yes, sir, they can. And we have many, many walk-in cases where people have come for help. Fingers dislocated, ankles bleeding, scratches, abrasions, and this sort of thing.
Why do you think it is, though, that the public doesn't seem to keep this in mind, doesn't know about these things until they need it, then it's too late?
Well, really, I don't think it's just one of those things. We wish that they would, though. Seriously, if they would just keep in mind that their nearest fire station for help or 911 for help, you know, that's very simple, really, if they would just do this.
And in a pinch, policemen, state highway patrolmen, and other such public officials are able, and in most cases trained, to help the injured. On the highways, particularly expressways of some states, interstate call boxes are seen every 1 or 2 miles. They're simple communications devices used to summon help. But Alabama doesn't have such a system or even a plan. The Alabama Department of Public Safety wants something else: 24-hour interstate patrols.
Really, the call box in itself does not solve the problem. You have to have the manpower. If you have the call box and someone needs help, then you have to have the manpower out there to answer that call. So I think in view of the great expense and the fact that you still need personnel to handle the calls, that our proposal is more feasible in that you'd have people out there without having to call them out. They would already be out there. I'd say our main problem as far as having the people out there, especially on the interstates, would be manpower. We don't have the manpower to patrol the interstate highways 24 hours a day as we would like. The interstate system is almost complete, and we've been concerned for some time about stranded motorists, and we have asked the legislature for the coming year to give us the funds to hire people to give us a 24-hour interstate patrol so that we can have people out there at all times.
What has been the response from the legislature in providing more money for something that apparently seems so needed?
Well, they've been very receptive. Of course, coming at this particular time when the economy is not as it has been in the past. We've been criticized for asking for this much additional money, but we've been asking for this for several years, knowing that the interstate system would soon be completed, and we wanted, when it was completed in Alabama, to have the people out there to provide this service.
Money is the concern. Can you put a price tag on people's lives?
No.
So what does this say about the situation of economy is bad and yet we need to help people?
Well, I think it's I think the legislature sets their priorities and they determine where the money will be spent. We hope that if we can't implement this program completely, maybe in the coming year, that they can partially implement it and then finish it up later. We're not saying it has to be done in 1 year, but we'd like to implement it and add to it as we go along.
The state, the counties, the cities all try to work together on an overall plan to help each other in the event one is hit hard or many areas have problems at once. Some plans are already in effect. Cooperative agreements between government agencies and levels of government are underway now, and more are constantly in the planning stages. Neighboring cities pull together when one of them is hit by a tornado. Agreements are made with Fort Rucker so helicopters based there can be called in for mass evacuations. Currently, the State Public Safety Department has no evacuation helicopters, but officials feel the needs in cases like that can be met through cooperative agreements. Total plans are constantly being revised, practices are held occasionally, and rescue teams try to be prepared.
We have an emergency disaster plan that we activate on a regularly scheduled basis each year. One was held recently at Huntington College, and all of the hospitals were involved in it. In fact, the hospitals put it on. It involved all of the emergency units of the city and the county and the state and the federal government that are in the area, as far as using helicopters to fly simulated wounded in from out of town in accidents. So we are prepared. We're prepared already. We know where the feeding places will be. We have emergency food operations that will be set up, clothing, medicine, physicians, equipment, debris cleaning crews, the electrical companies. All of us are involved in the disaster preparedness plan. I didn't say it was perfect, but we do have one, and we exercise it regularly, and we find some weak spots and we try to correct those.
But then this is not only to help the immediate Montgomery area, but in case some of our neighbors need help, it can be cooperation.
Yes, and in every area we try to cooperate with people in this immediate area. If we were to have a threat of an impending airplane disaster, with the plane circling, we would have time to call Prattville, Wetumpka, Selma, Fort Deposit, Greenville, the other places in the area, and we all have a mutual aid society. We respond immediately with whatever we can to help each other.
It has been said often that pre-hospital care is the key to a good emergency medical program. Medical assistance on the scene of an auto accident, at the location of a natural disaster, in the field, on the street. That emergency medical care is often the difference between a patient going to the hospital or the morgue. And that assistance can't be taken for granted. Some of it has to be paid out of your pocket. Some of it, in many cases, is funded out of your insurance premiums or paid by welfare tax dollars. And other assistance comes directly from the government, but that means taxes, and taxes, it is said, always go up, never go down. The paramedics of Prattville raise their own money to buy equipment in community-based events, money that comes from the people who benefit most from the system. Elmore County officials don't know how much they've spent on their system, considered one of the best in the state, but they have viewed their expenditures in terms of commitment to life-saving. In Tallapoosa and Coosa counties, more than 100 people are involved in emergency services with some of the most sophisticated equipment available. They stage extensive mock disasters to test the professionals and volunteers. Again, their expenditure in dollars is great, but is viewed in terms of commitment to community. The cost of saving life, then, is not necessarily one of dollars, but of commitment. The commitment to help.